I'm Paula Hancock in Seoul. This is CNN.
Hello and welcome. I'm Bianca Nobilo in London, and this is the Global Brief. Tonight, the battle for Severodonetsk. Ukraine's military says Russia is focusing on establishing control over the city, where thousands of civilians are stranded. Then European officials react to a new oil ban that would suspend 90% of Russian imports by the end of this year. And combating sexual harassment in Canada's armed forces. A new report outlines nearly 50 recommendations to change the culture of the country's military. We asked the Defence Minister why they're only adopting a handful of them. A city torn in two by conflict. Russia is doubling down on its offensive in Severodonetsk, the city that's key to its ambitions in Luhansk and the entire Donbass area. These images were shared on Telegram, showing Russian soldiers moving in on the city centre. Ukraine says that Russia seized huge parts of the city, but the battle is far from over. A separatist leader says the Russian operation is not going as fast as it would like. As violence flares, there are fears for the nearly 15,000 civilians still inside, who say they risk being massacred. Moscow's also stepping up attacks over the river in Lysychansk. One local official warns that Russian troops armed with flamethrowers are planning to, quote, clear the area out and burn anyone standing in their way. Melissa Bell is in Zaporizhzhia for us in southeastern Ukraine. Melissa, does the Ukrainian army have any hope of preventing Russia from seizing control of Severodonetsk? And how would seizing it impact Russia's battlefield options?
It does. Tonight, the Ukrainian Armed Forces, the Ukrainian Army, Bianca, continue to fight not just for Severodonetsk, but to mount counteroffensives. It had, of course, previously, you'll remember, in Kharkiv, pushing back Russian forces to the east of the city. It is even now pushing back towards Kherson. There's a counteroffensive underway there. And if you look at a map of those Russian-controlled areas, you'll understand why that is happening in several different points along that line. Here, for instance, where I'm standing in Zaporizhzhia, we are hearing regular outgoing artillery fire towards the Russian positions that are just 30 miles away. So there is the military push from the Ukrainians to try and push back on that line, because bear in mind that to them it is extremely important, for instance, to get those long-range rocket systems that are asking the United States for, because they feel that for the time being, Russia has the upper hand. So there is a Ukrainian counteroffensive, of course, underway at several points. And there is, of course, across in those Russian-controlled areas, fierce resistance that is mounting as well.
An explosion in the southern Ukrainian city of Melitopol, blamed by Moscow on Ukrainian resistors. And on Sunday, Melitopol is Ukraine, chanted in the heart of a town that's been in Russian hands for nearly 3 months. Yellow ribbons more defiantly displayed than elsewhere in Russian-held southern Ukraine. From Crimea to Kherson, symbols of silent resistance. But Melitopol's noisily resisted from the start. After the early chants of its people were silenced, and when the town's mayor was kidnapped by Russian forces in early March, some locals turned to armed resistance.
It was a very dangerous situation.
Now in Ukrainian government-held Zaporizhzhia, Ivan Fedorov says Melitopol will never give up.
They can kidnap, they can kill, they can't make some tortures, but we can't give support because our citizens don't want to live in Russia. I know it. Melitopol will return to Ukraine.
Melitopol fell quickly, and even as Russian forces pulled back to the south and east of the country, remained on the wrong side of a line that has hardened.
Russia is using hybrid methods of occupation. That means the Russian Federation is trying to identify and destroy centers of resistance, Ukrainian partisans. Such people are often uncovered and will sometimes disappear in Russian prisons.
Idea of the yellow ribbon was...
Which is why the Yellow Ribbon movement has become key, according to its spokesman in Kyiv. He tells me the ribbons allow people to pass on the message that Ukraine is present here, that there is no other south, than under the Ukrainian flag.
Here in Zaporizhzhia, there's also a sense that that line between Russian-controlled Ukraine and the rest of the country is hardening even as it continues to move forward. We can hear here the regular sound of outgoing artillery fire, but we can also see an emerging refugee crisis.
Hundreds of families living in their cars as they try to get back to their homes, now in Russian-controlled cities.
Bianca, another suggestion that that line is hardening came today when Ukrainian officials pointed out that in so many of those Russian-controlled cities now communications have essentially been cut off. Around the greater Zaporizhzhia area, for instance, there are 5 districts. This evening, 3 of them have had their communications cut off, some of them, of course, in Russian-Ukraine hands. And, of course, what that means is that people who are on this side who had fled, some of those you saw there hoping to get back across that line, are no longer even able to reach their families, the ones they've left behind back in their home cities. And so what you're seeing is Ukrainian armed forces mounting a counteroffensive to try and push that line back as far as it can. But as you heard in that report, resistors on the other side also trying to make a difference. That mayor of Melitopol, now in exile here in Zaporizhzhia, telling us that since the beginning of the Russian occupation in his town, when he was kidnapped in early March, he says hundreds of Russian soldiers have been killed in acts of resistance. Bianca.
Melissa Bell, thank you and your team so much for your reporting. Melissa Bell for us in Zaporizhzhia. Ukrainian officials say the country is now completely dependent on fuel imports after its biggest oil refinery was destroyed. The refinery in Kremenchuk was hit by Russian missiles in April. The chair of Ukraine's Oil and Gas Association says fuel shortages have triggered price shock. He says the government must deploy mobile oil refining complexes to increase production. And the European Union is targeting Russia's oil industry to try and dry up funding for the Kremlin's war machine. It agreed today to immediately ban 2/3 of Russian oil imports to the EU, increasing that amount to 90% by the year's end. The ban doesn't include deliveries on Russian oil by pipeline, meaning Hungary and 2 other nations are exempt from this. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky welcomed the new sanctions, but criticized the delay.
We have agreed on the necessity to increase sanctions. It's more than 50 days since the 5th package of sanctions. This is unacceptable for us.
CNN's Anna Stewart has more now on the latest package of EU sanctions and what it took to get the entire bloc to sign on.
Well, Bianca, after 1 month of negotiations, finally the EU has passed its 6th round of sanctions on Russia. Now, this package includes cutting the biggest Russian bank from SWIFT, that's the messaging service that underpins much of the global financial system, banning 3 Russian state TV broadcasters and sanctioning more individuals for war crimes. But the most significant measure on this was, of course, the embargo on Russian oil, which came with a big concession. In order to get the approval of Hungary, Slovakia and Czech Republic, an exemption has been granted for a key pipeline delivering Russian oil to these landlocked countries. Now, that does weaken the embargo overall, but it still means that at the end of this year, the EU will receive just 10% of the Russian oil it currently imports. And Russia will have lost what is currently its biggest oil customer. According to the think tank Bruegel, Russia currently receives $10 billion a month from the bloc for oil, so that will drop off to just $1 billion by the year's end. Of course, Russia will try to sell its oil to other customers, like India and China. Russian grades of oil are currently much cheaper, around $34 a barrel less than benchmark crude, and that, of course, makes it more attractive to markets outside the EU. But it also brings in less revenue for Russia. The other problem, though, with the EU's plan to squeeze Russia financially is the fact that the EU is still buying Russian gas, which is a huge source of Russian revenue. Many would like to see that added as a ban to the next round of EU sanctions, but that would likely face even fiercer opposition from the 27 member states. Bianca?
Anna Stewart there for us. While some countries have already banned imports of Russian oil, one country is taking advantage of discounted prices from Moscow. India's oil purchases, as Anna was just saying, have more than doubled from 2021 from Russia. Head to cnn.com/business to find out more about the deal and Asia's 3rd largest economy is getting from Russia. Ukraine's Prosecutor General says that more than 600 Russian war crime suspects have now been identified. She says that Ukraine has started prosecuting about 80 of those and that some of the suspects are high-level military officials, politicians and, quote, propaganda agents. She also says that Estonia, Latvia and Slovakia have joined the international investigation team that Ukraine, Lithuania and Poland formed back in March. They're now working with the International Criminal Court. Russia has denied targeting civilians or being involved in war crimes. Coming up on the show, Canada plans to crack down on gun violence, moving to freeze handgun ownership across the country, and more. And after 2 months of COVID frustration, most of Shanghai's residents can now freely leave their homes. We'll show you how people are reacting.
The Paul Newman Rolex Daytona is a specific variant on Rolex's very well-known Daytona wristwatch chronograph. It has a unique dial that's immediately recognizable. There was a particular group that came to be called Paul Newman Daytonas because he was one of the owners. It was not particularly popular in the first years that it was out. In fact, it was very unpopular. And it was really a long, slow burn over a period of several decades that saw it rise increasingly in popularity. Prices started to go up, they started to double and then triple and then quadruple and quintuple. And of course, you can't have a more Paul Newman Daytona than the Daytona that was actually owned by Paul Newman. So that watch came up for auction last year and was auctioned for a little over $17 million, which is an absolutely absurd price to pay for a wristwatch that was pretty unpopular when it first hit the market, but through a series of unusual and unlikely events, they've become the most collectible wristwatches of all time.
If I have the opportunity to leave the world in a little bit better place than when I got here, then I'm kind of participating in that. So I think it's important, we're being the largest jewelry company out there in volume terms. We have a big role to play and show the way in the industry, and that's what we're doing. So it's not just the right thing to do, that's an important motivator personally, but it's also future-proofing our business, because I do think that at one point consumers will take note whether you're a socially responsible company. We can already see, of course, NGOs are pushing this agenda, but I can also see that the financial community is now starting to raise the bar and require companies that they invest in to have a proper attempt to do some work in the sustainability area.
The world's biggest business stories in one place. Expert analysis from every corner of the globe. Marketplace, Africa, Asia, Europe and Middle East. With CNNBusiness.com.
Once in a generation opportunity.
Technology, innovation, business.
Afghan women are afraid that this is the beginning of your efforts to erase them from the workspace.
It's not clear. Even if we appear with the burqa, maybe they will say that women's voices are forbidden.
Did you ever imagine that you would be prevented from going to school?
Girls' education is fundamental to the dignity of Afghan life.
Do you believe that young girls will be allowed to go to school here in Afghanistan?
It's been 1 week now since the Uvalde school shooting killed 19 children and 2 teachers, shattering a community and igniting a conversation once again about guns in America. A bipartisan group of senators met virtually today to discuss gun reform. This, as the 2 latest victims were laid to rest, Amerie Jo Garza and Maite Rodriguez, 2 10-year-old girls who will never make it home. And gun control and extremism were on the agenda at the White House as well, as President Joe Biden met with New Zealand's Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern. New Zealand cracked down on guns following the 2019 massacre in Christchurch. Ms. Ardern told the president that New Zealand's experience is, quote, our own, but promised to advise him as best she could. And they promised to work together to combat online extremism. Mr. Biden says that he hopes to learn from New Zealand's progress. As America struggles with how to protect children from school shootings, its neighbour Canada is making sweeping moves to tighten gun controls. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced a bill Monday that would freeze handgun ownership. If approved, Canadians would no longer be able to buy, sell, transfer or import handguns. Canada's also considering banning hundreds of assault-style weapons. And joining us now to discuss is CNN correspondent Alexandra Field. Alexandra, great to have you on the show. So tell us, how likely is this to be approved in Canada, and what impact, if any, could it have on its neighbour, the United States?
The impact on the United States, we are yet to see. We know we are locked in debates in this country, but Canada not taking a breath here, moving very swiftly on the heels of what happened here in the U.S., hearing about these sweeping changes from Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. There is support there. This is a bill that is likely to pass in the fall, and this is an administration that has moved quickly on guns before. Just 2 years ago, on the heels of the deadliest massacre in Canada's history in Nova Scotia, Trudeau's administration announced a ban on 1,500 assault weapons, 1,500 different styles of assault weapons. They are now saying that they'll implement a mandatory buyback of those weapons in order to compensate gun holders and businesses. They're also saying that they will automatically prohibit other assault-style weapons from entering the market. Beyond going after the assault weapons, you're seeing this sweeping bill that would go after handguns, as you say, Bianca, freezing the buying and selling of handguns, also raising fines on those who try to traffic guns, adding additional red flag laws aimed at curbing gun violence, and also implementing new restrictions on long guns, which would no longer be able to hold more than 5 rounds. That means you would no longer see the sale of high-capacity magazines. Prime Minister Trudeau campaigned on these issues. He has talked about that often. He has made attempts to enact other gun safety laws. He is saying that he knows many Canadian gun holders are law-abiding citizens, but as gun violence goes up, action needs to be taken.
Alexandra Field, thank you so much.
The government, as a society, we have a responsibility to act to prevent more tragedies. Canadians certainly don't need assault-style weapons that were designed to kill the largest number of people in the shortest amount of time.
Prime Minister Trudeau saying that this is an issue of freedom for Canadians. He says it's about the freedom to be able to go to the supermarket or to be able to go to school without being struck by a bullet. He also says that Canadians need to do nothing more than look south of the border to understand that the problem only gets worse if the government does not act.
Alexandra Field, thank you so much. Now, a new independent report published by a former Canadian Supreme Court justice says allegations of sexual misconduct within Canada's military should be handled by an external civil court, not by the Canadian Armed Forces. In her report, Louise Arbour found that the Canadian military has failed to keep women in uniform safe from sexual harassment, and she says that complaints should be turned over to the country's Human Rights Commission. The report lays out 48 recommendations aimed at changing the culture within the Canadian Armed Forces. The Ministry of Defence has said it will immediately implement 17 of them, while the others require further analysis and planning. Joining me now from Ottawa is Canada's Minister of National Defence, Anita Anand. Thank you very much for joining us on the programme, Minister.
It's a pleasure to be here.
What do you have to say to the women in the military who've had sexual offences committed against them, who are not protected by the military or, by extension, the government who holds the military accountable?
On December 13th, 2021, I formally offered an apology to all women who have suffered sexual harassment or any form of discrimination. The military cannot be a place where women are guests. In other words, everyone should be able to work free from discrimination of any sort when they are putting on a uniform to serve our country. And that is what our government will continue to work towards. The Arbour report is another step towards assuring that women have a legitimate place free from harassment, a place where they can work in a protected and safe environment. Why is that important? Morally speaking, obviously, it's important for us to stand up every day for a non-discriminatory workplace. And operationally, it is also important. We need to recruit and retain members of the Canadian Armed Forces, and the only way we can do that and affect our operations nationally and internationally is that everyone who signs up to serve our country can work in a safe and respected and protected environment.
Now, the former Supreme Court Justice, Louise Arbour, blames the, quote, insular culture within the army and has urged for a complete change of the military system. So why are you only adopting 17 of the 48 recommendations from the report?
Actually, as I mentioned in my press conference yesterday and with Madame Arbour, I agree with and support all of the recommendations, and I accepted the report in its entirety. 17 of those recommendations are ones that we are able to act on immediately, and we are beginning to do so. The remainder require more planning and analysis before they are implemented. And that's why we will continue to move down that road. And I've asked my department and the Canadian Armed Forces to present me with a plan for implementing the remainder of those recommendations. But rest assured, I received and accepted the report in its entirety yesterday.
And so I presume one of those that perhaps requires more planning and analysis is this recommendation to let civilian courts handle the cases of sexual offence, because do you really think that even for the time being, until all of these recommendations are analysed, that a problem within the military of sexual offences against women can be solved by the military?
Well, actually, on November 4th, 2021, Madame Arbour had provided us with an interim recommendation, which I accepted on that date, to move all cases relating to sexual misconduct and sexual harassment under the criminal code from the military justice system to the civilian justice system. So we already have the process in place to move cases to the civilian justice system. Now, the recommendation in the final report of Madame Arbour goes farther than that, and you're exactly right. We do need to do the planning, because what she is contemplating there is the removal of concurrent jurisdiction, and as you can imagine, it's extremely complex. But rest assured, we are making sure that victims and survivors have the same procedural protections by moving those cases to the civilian justice system, and also by enacting the Victims' Bill of Rights, which will be fully implemented and in force in just a few weeks.
And finally, Ms. Anand, so President Joe Biden has said today that the US, well, over the last few days, the US will not send long-range rocket systems to Ukraine, ones that could potentially reach Russian territory. Do you agree with that decision? And if so, how will Canada look to further support Ukraine?
Well, from day one, in fact, since 2015, Canada has been extremely supportive of Ukraine. We have trained over 33,000 Ukrainian soldiers. We have sent millions of dollars of aid to Ukraine, and we have trained Ukrainian soldiers on the M777 howitzers in third country. The reality is we will continue to send whatever aid we possibly can. I spoke with Minister Resnikov this morning, in fact, in contemplation of additional aid that we will send. We earmarked $500 million in the most recent federal budget for that very purpose. And as I said, we will continue to stand with Ukraine, as we believe very deeply in the sovereignty, the security, and the stability of that country and the rules-based international order.
Minister of National Defence, Anita Anand, thank you very much for your time this evening and your candour. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. Bye-bye.
COVID-19 restrictions are starting to ease in Shanghai, China, but some neighbourhoods are still under incredibly strict lockdowns, and many fear that the toughest measures could come back at any time. CNN's Selena Wang explains from the Chinese capital.
Sprinting with shopping bags, residents racing to get out. After more than 2 months of a brutal citywide lockdown, Shanghai is finally cracking open the seal. The city's main train station packed with people trying to escape, but actually getting out of here is a treacherous journey. The city says it will fully resume transportation today. But earlier, people have been seen trekking miles across highways, dragging their luggage or strapping it to bikes. Even journeys of dozens of miles or more, not swaying their determination. The train station parking lot has become a campsite, some leaving days earlier than their departure time, terrified they could be locked down again if they stay at home. The masses outside the train station, a stark contrast to the rest of Shanghai. Hundreds of thousands still remain locked in. But even the lucky ones allowed out face a laundry list of restrictions. There are checkpoints everywhere.
No, this is definitely not freedom.
This Shanghai resident and her son, who wished to remain anonymous for fear of persecution from authorities, were finally allowed out after more than 80 days. Her only solace is seeing her son outside and smiling for the first time in a long time.
My child now has depression because of the lockdown. He started waking up at night and crying and shouting and saying there were people wearing masks in his bedroom, and he stopped eating.
That harsh reality miles away from what the government wants to show. Watch this state TV reporter pull the microphone and camera away during a live interview when the resident starts to complain about the lockdown. She says, "I've never lived through anything like this, being locked inside your home and not allowed to go out. What a big joke." Officials say the city will start returning to normal in June, but residents are doubtful.
So this does feel like endless nightmare.
Her freedom lasted less than a week. One COVID case was found near her, so she's back to lockdown. For over 2 months, Shanghai has had its freedom taken away, residents imprisoned at home or forced into quarantine centers like these. No one knows when this nightmare will fully end. Selena Wang, CNN, Beijing.
Well, that was the Global Brief. Thank you for watching. You can, as always, find me on my socials, on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and get excited because we will be bringing you special coverage of Queen Elizabeth II's Platinum Jubilee from Buckingham Palace on Thursday. And we'll also be talking about republicanism in the Commonwealth, so something for everyone. And I will see you again tomorrow.
Our mission here at CNN and journalists, the news comes first. That's when your heart beats a little bit faster. More breaking news that we are following right now. You really work as hard as you can, getting the facts. We're learning more about our alleged plot. It is critically important. To our viewers in the United States and around the world, welcome to the Situation Room. We have breaking news.
Africa Avant-Garde, Saturday on CNN in association with Access Bank.
When you travel the world, make sure the world travels with you. Check in, log on, and get connected with all of the latest developments at your fingertips. CNN Partner Hotels. Connected to your world.
This is the screen where it happens. The moments that can change
the world.
These are the faces we see, the voices we empower. This is the work that continues, who we are today and what we can become.
This is journalism that reflects the world we live in.
This is CNN. More people get their news from CNN than any other news source.
It is only Tuesday night at the French Open, but we are watching what could easily be the final. It's a heavyweight clash between two of the all-time greats, and Nadal and Djokovic are delivering yet another instant classic. And everybody wants to play in the World Cup, but for this Ukraine football team, it is about much more than the game, and it is very, very emotional. Hello there and welcome to World Sport. We're coming to you live from CNN Center. I'm Don Riddell. Rafael Nadal and Novak Djokovic are two of the greatest rivals in any sport, and today they have been playing in the quarterfinal of the French Open. It is the 59th meeting of their extraordinary careers, and the match has certainly lived up to all the hype. The intensity of the competition on the Paris clay has been epic. It is currently in the third set, tied at 1-all. The 13-time French Open champ Nadal, who holds a record 21 major titles, made a really fast start, taking the opening set by 6-2, and he was looking comfortable in the second, breaking twice and leading 3-love. But then Nole found his groove. The world number one fighting back superbly to win that set 6-4. They have been playing for more than 2.25 hours, and they've only managed 2 sets so far. Let's bring in our tennis contributor, Ravi Uber, for more on this. Ravi, it is clearly a fantastic match. What in particular has caught your eye so far?
Don, I think what caught my eye so far is how Rafa has played, because I honestly didn't see this type of a performance coming. I know the match is not over yet, but after he was taken to 5 sets against Felix Auger-Aliassime, where he made a comment after the match saying, you know, I never know when my last match of Roland Garros is going to be. And of course, he's had those foot problems. That coupled with the match taking place at night, which for me is a smaller factor, but still a factor where Djokovic seemed to have the edge. And with Djokovic having all the momentum, just winning in Rome and playing well at home in Belgrade before that, I thought this was going to be pretty comfortable for Novak, I have to say. But there have been some key moments in this match, Don, starting with the first game where Novak was broken. It was a long game, 10 minutes. Same thing happened at the start of the second. But then things turned in a game that lasted almost 20 minutes when Rafa was serving at 3-2 in that second set, still up a break. He was facing break points, got to game point, ended up being broken, and then Novak saved the next game also, and the match has kind of shifted. But from this point on, Don, even though we know Rafa loves his court and he's, the greatest ever player at the French Open, I think it's going to be tough for him to kind of come back and hold Novak off.
Yeah, and Djokovic certainly has the momentum. He's just broken again at the start of the third set. Djokovic has had an extraordinary season, hasn't he? Of course, deported from the Australian Open before he was able to hit a ball in anger. He's come back superbly from a setback that tennis players and athletes wouldn't normally have to experience. Nadal, as well, has had a difficult year, and he has indicated that this could be his last ever French Open. He's going to be turning 36 on Friday. What do you think? Could this be it? Could today be it if he doesn't win this match?
Don, I'll tell you a little story. Out at the tennis club earlier today, my own, and actually that's what the chatter was about. Chatting with a couple of friends and big tennis fans who were saying, "Hey, could this be Rafa's last match ever in his career, not only at the French Open?" So that is a possibility. Listen, I don't think he's going to make a decision after the match if he loses it. I think he's the type of guy who will absorb things just a little bit and kind of reflect on what's happening with his body because he's come back so many times. Is it his last French Open? I can certainly see that being the case because, as you said, he is going to be 36 and he's had the foot problem. He had the rib problem earlier in the season. But I don't think he's going to make any snap judgments if he loses the match against Djokovic.
Yeah, I agree. I'm sure he'll take a bit of time to reflect on that. Look, meanwhile, the exciting young Spaniard Carlos Alcaraz, Nadal's successor, that's what everybody has been saying. He is out. The 19-year-old went down in 4 sets to the Olympic champion Alexander Zverev. But surely Alcaraz will be back. How has he looked to you during his time in Paris?
Don, I think, he's showing a bit of his age. He's only 19 years of age. He had to save a match point in the first week against a fellow Spaniard. What caught my eye today in the match against Zverev, who he thumped in the Madrid final, although the scheduling didn't work out for Zverev at that time, was I felt some of his shot selection and his decision-making was a little bit off, maybe not targeting certain parts of the Zverev side, the forehand side, when the match was very tight. I think overall some of the shot selection could get a lot better, but he's 19, so that's totally expected. And one thing he was talking about, Don, after the match in Grand Slams is, you have to maintain your concentration for 3, 4, possibly 5 hours. That is what the greats like a Rafa and a Novak and a Roger do. So it's all part of the learning curve. I don't want to jump on bandwagons and say he's going to win X number of Grand Slams, because we know he might never win a Grand Slam. I think he will, but he might never, because we know things can happen in someone's career. But he's going to take this as a learning experience, as he said, and he'll be back. Whether it's on the grass, we don't know, because that's a very specialized surface. But come the hard course, you would certainly think so.
Yeah, and he's been great on clay and hard courts already this season. Ravi, speaking of talented youngsters, the 18-year-old Coco Gauff is into her first major semi-final thanks to a straight-sets win against Sloane Stephens today, just a few days after graduating from high school. And as you can see, she celebrated in style. Very special pictures there for the family album. And she's certainly taking it all in her stride. Take a listen to this.
Just enjoying life. I mean, before I would just be so hyper-focused that I wouldn't even walking around in the city because I thought it had to be tennis. But yeah, before my match, well, not today because I had to wake up early, but the matches that I play later, I would go walk around the city and go for a bike ride and just know and just enjoy it, really.
Ravi, it seemed for a couple of seasons that Naomi Osaka was going to be the future of women's tennis. Currently, Iga Świątek is dominating, but how big a role do you think Coco Gauff is going to play in the years ahead?
Well, Don, let me first of all say that I love Coco Gauff and the way she speaks. She's so very mature. I think she's got a very good head on her shoulders. Listen, I was just here talking about Alcaraz and saying we don't know how many he's going to win, if he's going to win any. So I'm not going to sit here and say that Coco is going to win X number, because the depth in the women's game is absolutely crazy. It's crazy good. There are no guarantees in tennis. There's no question about that. But another thing I like, which kind of talks or kind of backs up what she was saying, is that a couple of years ago, she'd been thinking, you know what, everybody's comparing me to Serena because they feel I can win X number of Grand Slams. And she said she started to believe that hype a little bit and started thinking too much about the results, like last year at the French Open, making the quarterfinals, thinking, okay, I got to win this thing, I got to win this thing. Whereas now, that's not her focus. She really is taking every match at a time. And she's going to get a rematch against the player who beat her at the French Open a couple of years ago. So I think there's more to come, certainly for Coco. And Don, don't forget, she loves playing on the clay. So that's another thing that bodes well for her.
Yeah, it certainly does. Ravi, it's always great to see you. Thanks again for joining us on World Sport. Next on the show, we've got an exclusive interview for you with one of the brightest young footballers in the world, Jude Bellingham, and he doesn't pull any punches about the state of the game.
We had players, black players in the team, players of all different backgrounds from all different countries in the team. And then as soon as they miss the penalty, they're not English, they're just black.
Hey, welcome back. The Borussia Dortmund and England midfielder Jude Bellingham is only 18 years old, but already he's made history in the beautiful game. He's also quickly realised how ugly that game can be. Bellingham is a young man with a very bright future, but he's already experienced racism within his profession, and he's already concluded that it will never go away. In an exclusive interview with CNN senior sports analyst Darren Lewis, Bellingham explains why he feels that way and why it's important to be so much more than just a football player.
Never give up, never let people create an image of you, always be, go out and take it and, own what you do, be yourself, and I think that's just the way I play, but that's the way I am as a person as well.
Jude Bellingham has always worn his heart on his sleeve. Despite his status as one of the most coveted players in world football, his commitment to Dortmund is well documented, but more importantly for him, family is everything.
My mom, my dad, two huge role models of mine because of the way they've obviously carried themselves, the things that they've had to face in their own journeys, and especially my mom. She's always given me a lot of lessons on how I'll be perceived by other people. Sometimes because of the colour of my skin, sometimes we're kind of stereotyped and stuff like that. I say about my footballing heroes, I talk about Gerrard, I talk about Rooney, I talk about Zidane, but I've got a black woman that I live with every day, and I see the way she carries herself, and for me that's, you couldn't have a bigger hero really.
Just like countless black players of his generation, Bellingham has already witnessed and endured racist abuse at just 18. His parents' guidance, however, has helped him to deal with it and to address it head on.
I say to my mum quite often, who I live with out here, that after a majority of games I'll get a racist message in my Instagram inbox, whether it's 1, 2 or 3, it can depend on what I've done in the game, if I've made a foul, if I've done something, There's not a single job in the world where you deserve to be criticised with racism, but that's the world we live in. And that's why we've got to do more. That's why the people in power have got to do more.
In December, Bellingham was fined by the German FA for comments he made about referee Felix Zweier in the wake of Dortmund's defeat to arch-rivals Bayern Munich. But he says German football's governing body were not as quick to respond when it came to his experiences of racial abuse.
I always remember sharing the first batch of messages that I got after I think we drew 2-2 away in Cologne. I think I gave away a penalty. It was half and half because it was a handball, I think. And I posted them just to say, just another day on social media so people could see what it was like for me. The club were quick to send someone to message me and make sure I was all right, and I really appreciated that. Had teammates that messaged me, of course, family members, and I didn't really receive anything from the DFB or DFL or anything like that. And I always kind of compare it to when I said the thing about the referee in December. They were very quick to get into contact to give me my fine, give me my punishment, kind of make it a big drama in the media. And I know that, sometimes I have to control my emotion better, of course, but, maybe we are alone and maybe they're not interested, maybe they don't care, and maybe it is down to me and down to us to work independently to get our message out.
It is nearly a year since what should have been a moment to cherish for Bellingham as England reached last summer's Euro 2020 final. Along the way, his appearance in the country's opening game against Croatia as a 17-year-old made him the youngest player of any nationality at a European Championship and the youngest Englishman to play at a major tournament. But after Marcus Rashford, Jadon Sancho and Bukayo Saka missed penalties in the shootout defeat to Italy, Bellingham watched the fallout as all three faced a barrage of online racist abuse.
The biggest takeaway from the whole experience for me was the contrast. I think you look at the running into the final, it felt like the country had united. We had black players in the team, players of all different backgrounds from all different countries in the team. And then as soon as they miss the penalty, they're not English, they're just black. Anyone can miss a penalty, anyone can make a mistake in their line of work, but it's impossible to be criticised like that. It should never happen. The human, look at what Marcus has done with the feeding the children. He's bringing out books, he's supporting people in that way. Jaden's, got pitches in London, I think, released some boots that a load of people from his area felt proud of. Bukayo, similar, all like top characters. And then you see them kind of brought down like that. It's disgusting, but it's hard to take, to be honest. As a teammate, it's really like, wow, because that could have been me. What if it was me and Mr. Penn, and all of a sudden, you're English for 7 games, you miss a pen and you're nothing.
As players, did you come up with a plan going forward on how to deal with that kind of situation should it happen again?
Yeah, to be fair, Gareth Southgate was brilliant. He's always brought it up as a topic in meetings when, we're aware that we're going to, like for example, we went to Hungary 2 months after the Euro, 2 or 3 months maybe. Same thing happened again, but we felt more prepared and we felt more supported because of what Gareth had put in place, I think. And I think, as a black player, you feel very grateful for that.
Far from being disheartened by the memory of that July day, Bellingham and other black athletes are more motivated than ever to inspire a generation and to drive change. Do you think we are in a really powerful age of activism right now?
Definitely. I think we've got a lot of black people in important roles within sport, especially the Williams sisters, the Hamiltons. You've got the amount of black players playing for England at the minute. I do feel like there's only so much they can do though, because they're giving their experience from their point of view. And I think that's where football and sport has to unite. I think it needs the power of people who aren't black to see how much they're struggling and how much it means to them and come together. And I'm not saying that that doesn't happen at all. That definitely is something that's improving. But when you talk about the whole war and the whole thing, I think it can be done more.
My son looks at somebody like you and he sees a positive black role model. How heartening for you and inspired are you by that?
Being told you're a great footballer is one thing, but when you've always been raised to first and foremost be a good person, and then to hear that people are inspired by the things you say and the way you carry yourself, I think that takes it to another level of kind of pride within myself, but also it tells me that it makes me aware again of that responsibility that I've got. I can't let down your kids, I can't let down other kids that look up to me, and that's a responsibility that I'm willing to carry.
Darren Lewis, CNN, Dortmund.
Well, CNN contacted both the German Football Association and League for comment in response to Bellingham's claim there. Neither has so far responded. And if you'd like to hear more from this articulate and inspiring young man, then check out his story on our website at cnn.com/worldsports. We'll be right back.
Being a Restovac robs these children of their soul. They never feel like they're valued. I remember one of the girls said to me, "It's as if I'm living, but I don't exist." My name is Joan Kahn, and I am the Executive Director for Restovac Freedom Foundation based in Port-au-Prince, Haiti. Restovac Freedom Foundation works with children who are living as Restovac. It's a form of child slavery. Many of them work from sunup to sundown. They do most of the chores for the family. When CNN came to Haiti for the Freedom Project with Common Dreams, we found this child in an area that we work. Her name is Fedna, and she lived with her grandfather at the time. And we went to visit the grandfather and asked if he would allow her to go to school, and he agreed to do that. And so we actually took her and enrolled her in school for the first time. She was 9 years old. Now Fedna is 20, and so she's in the 10th grade. They get a really late start on life, but at least they are able to be part of society. And I think just seeing these children become visible to people is a powerful thing.
Hello again. 32 football teams will play in the World Cup in Qatar later this year. We know the identity of all but 3 of those 32. This week we will learn the final team from the European qualification zone, a process that has been delayed by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. On Wednesday in Glasgow, Ukraine will take on Scotland, and the winner of that game will then play in Wales on Sunday. Whoever emerges will then join England, Iran and the United States in Group B in November. Ukraine hasn't played a competitive match since the invasion in February, and their Premier League season was abandoned last month. But as they attempt to qualify for the World Cup, they will have the support of many fans from all around the world. World Sport's Alex Thomas is in Glasgow to cover the match for us.
It was record-breaking Real Madrid coach Carlo Ancelotti who described football as the most important of the less important things in the world. And that perfectly fits this World Cup qualifier between Scotland and Ukraine at Hampden Park. As Ukraine's squad trains for Wednesday's game, they know that what's happening back in their home country is far more important than football. They also know a win would inspire a nation badly in need of a morale boost.
Що я мрію про те, щоб війна закінчилась. Але якщо кажучи про футбол, то у нас теж є мрія. У нас є своя мрія. Мрія поїхати на чемпіонат світу. Та подарувати ці емоції українцям. В цей непростий час. Тому що вони цього заслуговують.
As we saw in the recent Eurovision Song Contest, which Ukraine won, there is widespread sympathy for the country as it tries to fight off Russia. But Scotland will put that goodwill aside once on the pitch.
Nothing but good thoughts for them and good wishes for them, except during the game, because obviously they want to go to Qatar and represent their country, but I'm desperate to go to Qatar with Scotland. My staff are desperate to go, and most importantly, our players are desperate to take their country to a World Cup final, so that's what we focus on.
This match is important to Scotland too. The men's team hasn't qualified for a FIFA World Cup for almost a quarter of a century, but it's hard to imagine the neutrals cheering on anyone other than Ukraine. Even if they get past Scotland, they'll have to beat Wales in Cardiff on Sunday to reach Qatar 2022. And you have to go back to 2006 for the only time Ukraine has qualified as an independent nation since the breakup of the former Soviet Union. Alex Thomas, CNN, Glasgow.
Thank you, Alex. Still ahead on World Sport, we're going to be dipping into the archives to bring you a special interview with Real Madrid's goalkeeper Thibaut Courtois. If you know what he did in the Champions League final on Saturday, then you'll know why we're hearing from him again.
My name's Jim Brailsford, and I lead the Industry and Solutions Marketing team for Kinaxis. It's absolutely key that businesses incorporate sustainability into their business models. Firstly, you have got the corporate objective and being a good global citizen. You've also got the need to be reflecting that to your public, to your consumers, that show that you are actually being environmentally conscious. And also, as supply chains are more mature and are considering all of these things in a holistic way, it develops a sort of a steadiness to their operation. Supply chain sustainability will become a qualifier. It will not necessarily be the winner, but it'll become a qualifier enabling you to participate in the competition.
Afghan women are afraid that this is the beginning of your efforts to erase them from the workspace.
It's not clear. Even if we appear with the burqa, maybe they will say that women's voice